Hello, everybody. This is Chedva Rose on a podcasting recording marathon. I'm here tonight with Zahava and Yaakov List. And let me tell you a little bit about this couple. Zahava is the founder and director of Chazkeinu, an international mental health support network for Jewish women worldwide. For the past 8 years, she has been spending her time helping Jewish women with mental health issues feel supported and empowered. Zahava is passionate about spreading mental health awareness and stopping the stigma. She suffers from bipolar and experiences instances of post-partum psychosis. She's seen the benefits of peer support in such an isolating illness and feels passionate about sharing her experience with others. She lives with her husband, Yaakov, and their 4 sons in Baltimore. Yaakov is, when I asked him about himself, he said, Zahava's saving the world and I'm trying to get through the day. So that gives you an idea of how humble Yaakov is. Yaakov actually went to Telshe, Chicago, and then Rabbi Friedman in Eretz Yisrael. He works in IT at a little place called Telecom, which was featured here on an episode that was before this one. I don't remember what number. So you could take a look at that, and is finishing up a degree in computer networking and cybersecurity. So welcome, you two.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So actually, when I had this thought to invite Zahava, I heard Zahava's story. I think I heard it, and I'm not even, I don't want to say that I'm exaggerating, although I've been known to exaggerate, about 15 years ago. So I remember like almost none of it. And in preparation and anticipation and due diligence and just for the sake of professionalism and wanting to make sure that I crossed all my T's and dotted all my I's, I did not review it or remember any of it or look back on my notes or anything like that. So we're going to sort of go from scratch, but what I wanted to do was kind of focus as the experience that you guys went through together. I know, Zahava, you probably are the spokesperson for the family. And I remember hearing you talk about what you went through, how that affected your family, you know, what resources you're using, you know, how you overcame and all of that. But I did want to hear from Yaakov, and I thought that this would be like a really interesting joint interview. And so I hope that it will come out the way that I envisioned it. Either way, it should be an interesting conversation. So first of all, how long have you guys been together?
We're very close to our 20th anniversary. So about 20 years.
Mazel tov. What are you guys August?
We're August 2nd.
Very nice. You know how I know that? Because everyone has to get married before the Yom Tovim or after the Yom Tovim. So, so that was how we also have an August anniversary. Okay. So Yaakov, when did you first notice that Zahava was struggling with mental health challenges? And how did it affect your relationship initially?
So Zahava had, I would say I first noticed, let's say, after our first son was born, which was Zahava got pregnant fairly quickly. I think it was still in Shana Rishona. You know, the truth is, you know, right after she gave birth, she had postpartum psychosis. So I had no idea anything about mental illness, but it was very clear that something was wrong and she wasn't well. She was staying up all night. She was talking about being able to read people's minds, you know, and generally she wasn't behaving the way a woman right after she has her first baby usually behaves. She had all kinds of thoughts, and I didn't really know what was going on, but you know, thankfully we had you know, she had a labor coach who sort of kept an eye on her and told us that we have to get help. There's an organization in Eretz Yisrael. We lived for our first 6 years in Eretz Yisrael after we were married. There's an organization called Nitza that helps women with postpartum, specifically either postpartum depression or postpartum psychosis, but postpartum, let's say, mental health issues. That was very helpful to us, helped us find a psychiatrist and sort of, so I guess her labor coach introduced us to this organization. There are also some, you know, people that, helped us, that, let's say some people that we went to for Shabbos, that were, I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what or what to do about it. But we were able to get in touch with organizations that gave us the help and guidance we needed.
Zahava, from your perspective, were you like really open with Yaakov about it? Were you hesitant to share with him? Did it affect your relationship at all?
Yeah, so when I was sick, in the beginning, I was completely out of reality. Like I compare it to like somebody who has taken drugs or alcohol, but I didn't have any drugs or alcohol. I was just like, my inhibitions were completely out the window. So it was, as like, it got up to like 10 days after birth where I reached like a real peak where I was like already saying things to Yaakov, like, my soul is ready to go up, to like, I'm not needed in this world. I was like calling people and asking if they were Mashiach. Like, it was getting more and more obvious that something was really wrong. But what got me to actually do something was that someone in our neighborhood was, who had gone through something similar to me. She opened up and told me about her story. And she said, Zahava, just like if your baby would have strep, like you would go and get antibiotics, like you need to go to a psychiatrist and get medication. And it was definitely a strain between the two of us, because I was convinced everyone else has a problem. And up until they got me into a psychiatrist's room, but I was like pointing to Yaakov, like, he's the problem, I'm not. So I was really like in a lot of denial.
Mm.
And so it was like obviously a strain, like this is not what he was expecting after birth, like I wasn't really focusing on the baby so much. I was, I was doing what I thought was taking care of the baby, but I really was calling people and trying to figure out their past trauma. And, I was just like thinking I could read minds and all that. So once I ended up getting the medication, also was like such a bracha, because my actual psychosis convinced me to take the medication. Otherwise I was really fighting it very much. But I took the medication, and then once that happened, when you go from like such a high, like it really drops down. And I went into like a very, very severe depression. And through that, you get to like a balanced state, but it takes time. And when I was starting to get medication that was bringing me down, I was very agitated, and my mood swings were extremely strong. So when he would mention something that's so like an innocent thing to do, like, I think we should, feed the baby, because it was also hard for me. I had to stop nursing. So I felt like very out of control. Like when the baby needed to be fed, like I was like, no, he doesn't need to be fed. And like, it was like, he really, between him and my mother-in-law, like I almost like had to be babysat. Like they needed to watch me with the baby and everything. And I was, obviously it was like almost like another child that he was taking care of, because I wasn't myself. So that obviously put a big strain on the relationship, at least in the beginning.
Right. Did you go inpatient or?
So not that time. My first like 5 years into the illness, we were in Israel, and the way that my psychiatrist dealt with, I had like a number of relapses. I had about 4 relapses, and each of those times he just heavily drugged me. And I had Yaakov and, either my mother-in-law or someone watching me and making sure I was okay 24 hours a day. But then when we moved back to America, I've been hospitalized now about 4 times. So.
Yaakov, when you were babysitting Zahava, how did you deal with that in terms of yeshiva, which I'm assuming is what you were doing in Eretz Yisrael? How did you deal with yeshiva or with the community knowing about it? Because Zahava, you put yourself out there, you were calling people, so it was not like something you could hide. Yaakov, how did you deal with that in terms of your yeshiva and your regular schedule? And then how did you deal with it on, more like of a PR, situation?
So that's a good question. You asked how it affected our relationship. It was really a crisis. It wasn't just a quiet situation. Let's say she was a little bit down, she slept a little bit more and did a little bit less. it was like it was very, very severe illness. It completely changed her. So it was very hard to deal with, and there was a lot of fallout for me personally. At that time, Zahava was a little bit less into being public. The advice we got that was very well-meaning from Nitsa was to try to keep it quiet so that people wouldn't look at her differently. And at that time, we tried to do that. The problem was that she was, very into calling people. And I was trying to look after her and the baby. I didn't have the capacity to babysit her every minute and keep her busy every minute to keep her from calling people. I was very fortunate that, you're right, I was in Kollel full time, but my Shiva was very understanding about, I had a sick family member that I had to take care of her. So I missed a lot of time from Kollel when she needed to be taken care of. The truth is, I was told that someone needs to be with her 24/7. It could be pikuach nefesh to leave her alone. And I took that very seriously. If I was the only one home, I didn't go out to mincha or out to davening. We organized around with the community, maybe girls to stay with her at certain times, so that I could get out. But even when I was able to get out for a few hours, I didn't have the head for learning. I was really 24/7 taking care of my wife and the new baby. So
Right.
it was definitely very challenging. But we had a lot of help around the community and a lot of support.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm imagining that you also had to sort of pick up, I don't want to say slack because that's not the right word, but sort of do things that you possibly would not have or maybe didn't do before, as a yeshiva bacher, as a kollel younger light, like I could just imagine like cleaning and cooking and errands and like things that you might not have been preoccupied with previously. Is that correct?
So I'm trying to remember.
I mean, you definitely had to step up to the
Yeah, I
plate.
definitely had to step up. When the truth is, we talked about it starting at when he was born. I really think Zahava was depressed, during the pregnancy also. At the time, I thought she was just tired because of the pregnancy. But looking back, I really think that she was depressed. And I had to start picking up the slack before, really.
Yeah, I just to add on a little bit about the like going public and being told. See, for me, it was very hard because once I was starting to get better, and like I was being given kind of feeding this like shame where, oh, don't tell anybody about what it was because you don't want people to think differently of you. But like, hello, people knew, like, so they think differently of me, like what am I, And so it was very hard because I was always like, I turned into being very like guarded in front of people because I'm like, maybe they think badly of me. And it was very hard. It was a very like this tight, spot to be in because it's like anytime I was with people, I never felt like I could just be myself because I'm always worrying, are they judging me? And people weren't talking about it. And it wasn't like out there so much at all. Like there was no one who out there besides the person who reached out to me and said that she's been through it herself, but she was and that's also what gave me hope, is that she was like the kind of mother I would want to be, the kind of, person I wanted to be. So I did know that there was someone out there that went through something like this and was functioning very well, but like there was just no one to talk about it like with. That was really what I was missing a lot. And just to talk about like with the pregnancy, like even during the pregnancy, like when we first got married, I was making breakfast, lunch, dinner. I was like, so on top of the house and so excited to start my new home. And then it was 10 months after we got married that we had the baby. And like I would say when I was probably like towards the end of my second trimester, I started like sleeping till 2:00 and like getting less and less interested in things that I would normally get excited about. So I only realized after I got so high that I was in like a more mild depression.
Right. So that's probably like a really isolating factor that a lot of people experience because there's such an emphasis in especially the Orthodox community to not share what you're going through because of what people will think of me, and let's try to keep it under wraps, and all of what you're just describing. And so if anybody's going through any mental health challenges, especially something as common as postpartum depression, or even, I never even heard of prepartum depression, but I'm imagining that's what we're discussing here, that people don't want to make friends, and they isolate more because, like you said, you felt sort of outside of the circle of people because you were just guarding yourself. You were just really, I think that's a very interesting point to make. And I'm sure it's going to come up further into our conversation about what opening up a network for people who are going through these challenges, how that has affected people's social lives and therefore their mental health. So we'll probably get to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Yaakov stood up, you found this organization that was helping you. So let me ask you on, it can be, well, first of all, what do you do, Zahava? Let's say you can't have two people who are going through a crisis at the same time, right? Like that's not, you can't, it's difficult. What do you do if Yaakov needs extra support and you're going through a challenging time? Maybe you're I guess you'd use the word relapse, or you're having some instability or some sort. What happens with Yaakov? Yaakov, how do you deal with that, or how do you as a couple deal with that?
That's an excellent question that I'm still looking for an answer to. You know, the obvious answer is therapy, but it's not so simple. Therapy is extremely expensive. I found that insurance only covers after the deductible is met, making it, I've done for a little bit at different times, and we've tried therapy here and there, but it's very difficult to pay for, more, definitely two people to get therapy. We have done some marital therapy, joint therapy at different times of our lives. But, I've found that, some things that help me is carving out time for myself, let's say, that every Sunday morning I go to a coffee shop by myself and just sit and drink a coffee and relax. And sometimes that gets me through the week, knowing that I have that time, that quiet time to myself. It's it also knowing that in times of crisis that, I tend to be the kind of person to get through a crisis that I find, at least for myself, that when there's a crisis, you're able to get through the crisis, but there's always a price to be paid afterwards.
Yes.
So getting through the crisis is one thing, but then dealing with the aftermath could be difficult.
Okay. So
sometimes I have hobbies that aren't always the best use of time, but sometimes you need them, like let's say computer games. Sometimes escaping from reality can be unhealthy, but sometimes if you're in a very, very difficult situation, you need to do it to get you out of that situation for like half an hour or a few hours even, or some time, whatever it is that gets you through. Sometimes you need to do things that aren't always, let's say, lichatchila.
Okay, so it's like an outlet of some sort, either productive or
Yes.
not productive, as long as it helps remove you from the situation in some way, like a distraction.
Yes.
Right. So that's really interesting. Zahava, what have you found in terms of coping strategies or techniques that you have found helpful? Because now I imagine your children are part of the conversation. They're older, they understand more what's going on. I imagine that as a family, this is a conversation.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say that there are times where I'm still struggling, but one of the coping mechanisms I have is like opposite action, or like getting out of myself. When I mean by opposite action, meaning like if I want to sit in my bed the entire day and do nothing, like to get up and see if possible to just go and push myself to do something, and I do end up feeling good. But with in the same sentiment, like when I'm also having a hard time, not obviously when I'm completely out of reality or manic or psychotic, but I'm talking about even just the regular struggles that come up within the disease of bipolar, that one of my coping mechanisms is to get out of myself and see how I could be helpful to another person. So I try, it's not always so easy, but I definitely try to be as present as I can to Yaakov, to my kids. And just as far as my kids wise, like we've been very open with them from the beginning, because when I was talking about keeping quiet and struggling through keeping, like not saying anything to anybody, that quickly changed. And as the years goes by, I talk about it at this point, I talk about it as if I'm talking about my recipe for challah. Like I talk about it so much, but I think it was a process. Like I remember the first time I decided to have my story published in the Mishpacha, had a section, the Lifelines. And I remember talking to Yaakov about getting my story there, and he said, let's just call you Zahava, not Zahava List. And like slowly but surely, we got to the idea of, using my full name and talking more about it. I'm very public, been on podcasts, and I've been more and more, comfortable. And that's because of getting out of isolation and really trying to be there for other people, which we'll talk about more, I guess. But what I was going to say about coping mechanisms, like I've been in therapy since, we're going back 19 years, and I've been in therapy since, different therapists giving me different modalities in therapy, that for me, like it wasn't just a chemical imbalance, like take the medication and you're done. For me, it was a lot of unprocessed trauma that came out. Even in those first few days after birth, I started talking about things that I never even knew was trauma for me. So going to therapy and spending 5 years just going through things and realizing certain things were not okay and really affected me very deeply. So doing different, Baruch Hashem, like they've come up with so many different modalities and working through trauma. Like there's something called IFS, which is internal family systems. There's EMDR, there's somatic, I've done, you name it, like we've done it. So, and like I said, we've done EFT, like couples therapy. We've done so many different types of therapy. So that has definitely given me a huge amount of coping mechanisms in this journey. But I think also just I learned that I could write, and I could write songs. I composed my first song in a sight board. I found that like art is really a big thing for me, and just different things that help me just with coping, like learning how to give myself that self-care that I need, and what gives me like a charge when things are hard.
Right. So just to go back to your children for a minute, if you don't mind.
Can I just add on one thing?
Yeah, sure.
As far as being public,
Mhm.
I'm usually more a behind the scenes kinds of person. I'm more of a private person, but my feeling with this was that, mania is very loud and very public. When Zahava gets manic, she starts calling the whole world. And, when she gets manic, she gets very, very manic. And it's obvious, people know about it. So, once people know about it anyway, would they rather it be an open secret like that everyone knows but no one talks about, or something that, okay, this is what it is, this is what it feels like, and I have something, if it's something that everyone knows about anyway, we may as well talk about it. There's no point in pretending it's a secret when it's not.
Right. I always use the analogy of like overeating, where there's a lot of shame and guilt associated with overeating, for example. So a lot of people hide it, but it's really not something you can hide. It's like in your face. Everybody can see that you have an overeating problem many times. It's a physical manifestation of your relationship with food. And so, people can see that you're struggling with food, but we're all going to pretend like we don't see it because you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to be open about it. Whereas you can be open about it, be like, yeah, I'm struggling with my weight now. I'm going to stay away from the pizza. It's almost the same thing. Like everyone could tell that you're struggling mentally, but if you don't talk about it, that has its own set of pitfalls, because like you said, it's an open secret that then sort of actually hinders the relationship, makes it uncomfortable for people and yourself to sort of get closer and feel open and vulnerable and foster relationships. Um, Zahava, I don't know about your kids, but my kids, like, if I get a cold, that doesn't make them like let me pass up on dinner making. So I guess I'm wondering, like, I know that your kids know about it. I know you're open about it. What happens if your kid is going, did it ever happen? Let's say that way. Did it ever happen that your kid was struggling with their own set of issues? Stuff was going on at school, stuff was going on with their friends, they themselves were sick, and meanwhile you're in the middle of a crisis. How did that play out? Did that ever happen?
So, I mean, thank God there was never like a crisis that they've been through at the same time that I've been through a crisis, but I could tell you that because I have like a more sensitive soul and, things like that, when there was a time where one of our kids were bullied, like I felt like because I have that like passionate side of me, like I was able to, speak to the teachers and the principals and really be empathetic and really caring for them. So, I mean, thank God, like we were lucky. We had years where my parents and in-laws lived near us, so they were like there for the kids, when we needed them. But like, Baruch Hashem, hopefully there won't be like any kind of, major emergency at the same time that I'm not well. But I think that a big thing is that my kids like realize also that I think that like we really try to show them that this is just like any other illness. It's not something that they have to hold shame about. And one of our kids, when he was like 11, came to me and he, we'll talk about Chazkeinu, but when we talk about the stigma and like taking away the stigma, he heard the word stigma a lot. And he's like, I think I know what stigma is. And he said, stigma is when you judge someone for doing something that they didn't do anything wrong. And he ended up like, we wrote a song together about taking away the stigma, and like, he kind of owned it. He ended up like speaking on one of our phone meetings, like,
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, that was how he dealt with it. Like I have my, another one of our sons is more like Yaakov, where he's more like, he's not as verbal, but I think he's proud of, the things that I've been able to accomplish and found meaning from, going through my struggle.
Right. That's really beautiful. And that's what we want for our kids, to be able to like be empathetic and understand what other people could be going through. So that's really beautiful. Let's talk about Chazkeinu. When did that come about? What was the impetus for that? Like, at what point did you realize there was a need, you wanted to fill it? How did that, what was how did that get built up? And tell me a little bit about it now.
Yeah. So really day one, I've like from the beginning, I really felt like I needed to find others who get it and who understand. I'm a twin. And I think that like inborn, like having someone who's kind of been with my journey, like so much, like I needed people. Like I was like missing the fact that I couldn't just like talk about it with someone and someone to be like, not like, oh, that's so hard. More like, I get it. I know it's really hard, and I just couldn't really find that. And then after living in Israel for 6 years, we moved back to our hometown, and there somebody introduced me to a From OA meeting. And I was just kind of convincing myself that all my problems are talk about overeating, like eating was an issue for me. So I said, okay, I'll join the meeting. And there were a lot of things I liked about the 12-step meetings. I liked the fact that there was peer support, like we were all in this together. I liked the fact that people were sharing their experience, strength, and hope openly, sharing their stories. And I also liked the fact that one of the tools of any like 12-step program is outreach, meaning like instead of thinking about all the people who need to come help me, it's like, no, like who can I go be helpful to? Who can I reach out to? And I remember one of my sponsors from the 12-step program had me call 3 people a day just to see how they're doing. And I saw that through these phone calls, like I was getting so much out of it, even though it was about me trying to see how other people are doing. So I got some really great, like, I feel like a lot of it came from the whole 12-step fellowships. I ended up trying out different fellowships. I got very involved in one of them where I was leading phone meetings in my local library. So I knew how to like lead a phone meeting. And then I ended up seeing advertised but what I also felt like I was missing from it is like, anytime I met someone who had a mental illness diagnosis, I was like very drawn to them, but that wasn't really the emphasis of what they were talking about. A lot, especially some of the OA is a lot about food and a lot about the addiction of food. And I was more interested in the whole peer support, the outreach, the connecting with people who are going through a mental illness. So anyway, so I ended up finding like an advertisement for Jewish women, a phone meeting for those who are struggling with infertility. So I said, oh, if there's a Jewish, phone meeting for infertility, maybe they're also going to have a Jewish phone meeting for women struggling with a mental illness. And I remember reaching out to them and they're like, oh, that sounds like a nice idea. Let us know if you find anything. And I was looking all around. I ended up going on to an online forum, it was like an open forum. It was called fromsupport.com. And I went on it and it has like different message boards going by like what illness you have, physical illness, mental illness. And I look up like bipolar and I opened it up and I started a thread, like, is anybody interested in starting a women's group over the phone meeting for women struggling with mental illness? And I ended up, one reply was like, oh, that's never going to happen. And then one reply was a private message straight to me saying, sharing her story, Naomi Shulman, she's from Rochester. I was in St. Louis at the time. No, like it was like such a shkacha, like it was amazing how we met. And she had gone through a very similar journey to me, including being very involved with 12-step support, and also looking for something in the community that would cater to women going through an illness like ours. And so she was on board with helping me. And then also hashkacha, I found someone else, Tamar Mishkin in Chicago, who now has since opened up her own group called La Briut, but she also was interested in the same thing as us. And the three of us, it took us a few months. Like I wanted to speak to all different rabbanim and therapists to get like their approval. And then I also decided I want to name it, and I named it Chazkeinu because Chazkeinu, really there is an organization called Samcheinu for widows. And I figured if there's Samcheinu, which is to, bring happiness, I said I want ours to be Chazkeinu, because for those of us who are going through such an illness and such struggle, we really need strength. We need strength from Hashem. We need strength from each other. And we also can give strength. Like we could give and receive the strength that we need. So I felt like it was like this opening that was coming. And in March of 2016, we thought we're going to just open up a phone meeting. I did have like all these ideas and visions of what we could possibly do as we grow, but those were just dreams I never thought would happen. And they did, and very quickly, because the need was really there. But our first meeting was just a couple of women, and now we're in the thousands.
So Yaakov, how much time does Zahava take on her organization?
That's a good question. A lot.
Mm-hmm. How does that impact your relationship?
That is a good question. I'm very proud of what Zahava accomplishes, and I feel that everything she does for people is a source of strength for her, but also is a big source for our family. And it's an honor to be able to help Klal Yisrael, especially people that are sort of have tsaros, have people that are troubled, and she's in a unique place to help people. And at the same time, she's a wife and a mother too. So finding balance in life is very challenging. And I think it's fair to say it's an ongoing challenge to find the right balance.
Okay. Zahava,
Yes.
tell me about the balance, finding that balance.
Right. So I think for me, it's very hard because I think it's maybe part of the whole bipolar that I am a very extreme type of person where like when I'm in something, like nothing else exists, like almost like a hyper focus. So for me, like if I'm designing an email that, that goes out, or I'm planning an event or whatever I'm doing, I'm putting my whole self into it. So it's like, sometimes it's like, it really is about working on myself to stop in the middle of something, take care of something for the family, or to not do something. Like tonight, there's a big event in Lakewood that I would have loved to be at, but I felt like I needed to be home with the family. And I have to make these decisions a lot of what am I going to be a part of and what I'm not, because, I want my husband and kids to be priority for me. And I think that they do make a lot of sacrifices because they believe in what I'm doing.
Right.
But I think that I just have to, when I schedule my week, each week, it's like I definitely try to put in things that will be family and then also Chazkeinu, and Baruch Hashem, as we've expanded and we've done so many different projects and programs, I also have so many volunteers purposely so that I shouldn't have to be doing everything. So I try to delegate. But I think it's like, I do look at Chazkeinu as like one of my children. Like
Right.
it's really something that like, heart, like just blood, sweat, and tears. Like we put so much into Chazkeinu, and every single person who reaches out to Chazkeinu, like I want them to feel like they are like part of our family. Like we call our Chazkeinu sisters, Chazkeinu family, because, a lot of people just feel like this is their only place where they belong, where they can be themselves and they can be real. And it's very rewarding. But yet at the same time, of course, I really, I want to put family as priority as well.
I have so many questions. I hope I know I'm not going to get to all of them. I do want to ask, which one of the things I want to ask is, with Chazkeinu, what percent would you say are people who are open about their struggles? Like in terms of destigmatizing and sharing that they're going through the struggle. How many people are anonymous? How many people are
Yeah.
not?
So it's a good question. So what's amazing is you see, because we create an environment where we're not only trying to take away the stigma around us, we're really trying to take away the self-stigma. So by women joining meetings where these topics are being talked about openly, they're hearing people sharing their stories and moving forward in their lives. They're seeing that people just like them, who they would never even imagine going through something, they see them at a Shabbaton. Like like people are getting more and more comfortable that you see people at a Zoom meeting, they come on without their video on, and like their name is Hi. And then eventually they not only use their full name, but then they end up like hosting an event for us. So you just see like there's certain people who transition where then they go around and like, everybody in their own way, will feel more comfortable. But some people do go and they'll meet other people and they'll recruit people into Chazkeinu, and they'll say that they have something, that they're going through something. But the most important thing is that they feel more comfortable in their role and with their illness. So even if they're not like telling everyone, they still are not walking around thinking like I have this really, horrible thing in me. It's like, no, like I have a challenge like any other challenge, and I'm going to get help just like anyone else deserves to get help. So you could definitely see the transition for people to feeling much more comfortable with themselves. And it's amazing to see, and Baruch Hashem, like there's been girls and like women who we have 18 and up, and we have, all different diagnoses, anyone who is struggling emotionally, mentally. And then we also have single, married, divorced, widowed, and we have all different religious backgrounds. And we really like we value the fact that everyone is united and differences aside, like we're all connected. And it's like beautiful to see, like at a Shabbaton Friday night, everyone's dressed in all different ways. And we're all one, we're all connected. And because we have such a deep connection. And that really energizes people to feel like they're part of something and they don't have to always hide, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's in
Yeah.
their own journey with it. There's definitely people who have been in Chazkeinu for a long time and still won't go out and tell people, and that's fine. You know, everyone has their own way. For me, it's literally a coping mechanism to talk about it. And I compare that to when somebody comes into a room with a stain on their shirt. So they could be the entire time like trying to hide that stain, or they can come in and be like, oh, it's so annoying. I just spilled milk on my shirt, you know? And then it's fine. They're free for the rest of the time. So even if someone sees their stain, it doesn't matter. Like, so for me, it's like, when I just talk about it and I say it, then I could just be me. I don't have to be hiding anything.
Wow. What would you if you could go back and talk to this question is geared for both of you, Yaakov and Zahava. If you could go back to the younger you when this first took place almost 20 years ago, 19 years ago, what advice would you give your younger self?
Okay, I'll start with that one. The biggest difference for me, Baruch Hashem, the frequency of Zahava's, let's say, episodes have decreased, at least the major episodes. But hopefully she won't have any more. It's still possible for them to happen. For me, after being married 20 years and seeing the how everything goes, if she has an episode, I know that through history and the course of her illness, that she's going to get back to herself. That yes, she's going to be very sick. She might be very sick. She might have to be hospitalized, but there's a long recovery period. But she will get back to herself. The first time this happened, I had no idea. I just knew that I married a girl. We've been married for less than a year, and she's completely, I knew nothing about, or very little, not more about mental illness than anyone else knows. And she was, acting completely different than the girl I married. She was.
I hear how politely you didn't say insane. That was
very good. I'm thinking about words not to use.
Okay.
And anyway, so. At that time, I had no idea if I would ever get, the girl I married back. Now I know that just like there are many illnesses that they're chronic illnesses, they have flare-ups, and you go through a period of time that may be very difficult, but I know that she's going to get back to herself, that she'll be sick for a while, and then things are going to get, and there's going to be a recovery period. But she's going to get better. Some of the things that given me chizuk over the years is, let's say, I read a book about, a Hasidic couple that they were a young couple that the wife had serious kidney disease, and she needed dialysis. She ended up getting a kidney transplant, but it severely impacted their lives, and it was very difficult. And it showed me that we're not the only couple going through, everyone has challenges. And a lot of people have very hard, difficult challenges that change their lives. But I saw that couple got through it. And who knows how many people there are that have very hard, difficult challenges, but aren't writing books about it. And, everyone's challenged, but it's, at this time, I know that it's a challenge that it's going to be a hard period of time. We're going to get through it and get back to our lives.
So you'd basically tell yourself that you'll get through it, where perhaps before your younger self was like, how is this even possible? How are we even there's a lot of uncertainty that you had back then about, overcoming this obstacle. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Zahava?
Yeah, so I think a bunch of things, but I think one thing is that that you're not alone, that there are so many people who struggle, and mental illness is just like any other illness. I think I would also say that there's gonna be a time where you're gonna see that what you went through is you're gonna find meaning in it. I think also is that you are stronger than you think you are. You have, I'm saying, like, you're gonna learn different skills that are gonna help you through this, and it's really gonna make you into a better person. I think I would also say that it doesn't define you, and that you're not like an amazing person but because of what you've been through. And I think that the last thing I would say is that, this is not gonna last forever, and you're gonna get better. And even if you still struggle, you're gonna have the tools to deal with whatever comes your way.
Wow. I know that one of the advice that I would give my younger self is one day at a time. I love that advice. You just need to get through it one day at a time. You don't have to worry about the past, present, future, just today. Well, present, I guess you do have to worry about today, but you know what I'm saying. That's really lovely. It's finding that silver lining in it, finding that actually reassuring yourself that you have the strength to overcome and not only overcome but thrive. So
yeah, and I also want to say, I'm not trying to say like, oh, all challenges are for the best. Like, it's not easy when you're struggling to hear that, and that's not even fair to say, but what I am saying is that through your struggle, you're going to see your greatness. You're going to see what you're capable of. And obviously we don't ask for challenges, but sometimes challenges do show us that. But I also think another thing I would just say also is just take the next right step. Meaning when you say one day at a time, like you don't have to think about what you're going to do the rest, just what's the next right step. That definitely helps me also.
Right. On a side note, I did a podcast about burnout you guys should definitely listen to when it comes out. Because it sounds like Yaakov, you and maybe Zahava, you also can benefit. I mean, it sounds like you're already using some of these coping skills, making time for yourself, trying to communicate, going to therapy, and all this kinds of stuff. So it's really so interesting to be having such an honest, open conversation on something that millions of Americans and Israelis and worldwide, it's more than ever, are struggling with, and that is so stigmatized. I think it's becoming a lot less stigmatized. Zahava, just briefly talk to me about that from when you started this. There was obviously a significant, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but significantly more stigma than there is today. Is that right?
Absolutely.
So what do you attribute that to?
I think that more people, the discussion is becoming more open. I'm saying one of the ways that a lot of people heard about Chazkeinu was because I spoke on the Chazak line, where they have a inspiration line, and one of the prompts is personal stories. So most of the stories were about people's hashgacha pratis, miracles happening to them, or physical illness. I was one of the first people who came on, said my real name, left my phone number, and told my story, including opening up for anyone who wants to join Chazkeinu. And I for sure have gotten hundreds of calls from just that. So even having them I really thank the Chazak line for allowing me to share my story so publicly. In that way, we've got a lot of people who don't have internet access, or who wouldn't have been exposed to this in other ways. I think also the Jewish magazines were more open to publishing stories and articles on different topics in the mental health world. I think there was more and more from therapists who have really been speaking and advocating for their clients, and in terms of talking about it, and in terms of making it the community aware of what the struggles really are. I also find letters to the editor be really important, and I'm actually asking all of your listeners that if there's something that we see in any of publication where it could maybe look at it in negative view on someone with a mental illness, to write in and say, hey, like, that's not the case, So I have empowered actually women to, write letters to the editor or to be, part of some kind of, project in that. And I think like the power is in the numbers. The more people who are getting out of themselves and starting to talk about it, even with just that one confidant, that one neighbor, one teacher, whatever, like slowly but surely it does spread to become normal. And I always say, like, the more it becomes part of the conversation, the more normal it is. So when I go to a wedding and someone says to me, what do you do? Like within 5 minutes, they know I have bipolar. I started an organization for mental illness. Like I talk about it so much. So that person is hearing from someone like me, who's just like so regular about it. So when they go home and they think about mental illness, they have a little bit more of like, oh, like I could see somebody at a wedding looking like they have everything together and they also struggle. Like, so it kind of spreads in that way. And I think Rabbanim also are more and more getting aware. Like say OCD in religion has become something that more Rabbanim are learning how to paskin shilas and decide on different things based on mental illness. Mental illness is definitely a big key when it comes to halacha, when it comes to the hashkafa, and also we have Kala teachers who are more aware of trauma and of just anything, and things, emotional health going into a marriage. So I think more and more people are understanding that this is, whether they like it or not, this is something that it seeps into every community, everywhere in the world, like you said. So either we jump on the bandwagon or a lot of people just get hurt,
Right. So it sounds like you embody be the change you want to see.
Absolutely.
That you want to, the thing that you can do is open the conversation about yourself. And with that vulnerability and that openness, other people speak to you about their vulnerabilities and their insecurities and their, shame and all the things that they're going through, and then sort of gain strength and chizuk through Chazkeinu, and through you. And that is amazing. I don't want to take any more of your time. I do want to let the listeners know I'm going to be giving Chazkeinu's information in the notes. So if anybody wants to find out more about Chazkeinu, the link will be in the notes. And Zahava and Yaakov, thank you so much for being open and being willing to answer my questions, and I think this for me has been tremendous. I appreciate, Yaakov, that I know you're not feeling great, you're still trying to recover, and you have school and you have family, and I appreciate the time that you took to speak with me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
No problem. Have a good night.
You
Good
too.
night.
Bye-bye.